Justine, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, we haven't done anything, but thank you. Hey, I want to jump into why I think this is a cool conversation.
I'm curious.
Yeah. Okay. So when we started Caddis, I was collecting money off of all the sales to put somewhere, philanthropic, and I didn't know where, because I had just come from Patagonia, and we'll get into that later. But I knew it was important, but I didn't know what to do with it. And then it wasn't until like a year after operating that we had the big aha of like, okay, music education, we're going to take a percentage of all sales and send it to music education. So like, I've always had this understanding that philanthropic capitalism is important. But mine didn't come until after I worked with Yvon Chouinard at Patagonia. And then you, on the other hand, were born and raised into it. And you simply didn't have a choice.
Right.
And it's a completely different perspective and point of view and really cool life experience that you have in relation to this thing called philanthropy. And where most of us choose it, you were born into it. And I just think there's something really cool about that. And that's why.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, it's a wonderful opportunity to kind of vocalize this outside of me, because I don't really think it's not really a subject you ever really talk about, because it just happens in my family. So that idea that there's a conscious thought process to this is very interesting to me also, because that was never the choice.
There's a lot of social signaling that goes on with philanthropy, and you are so not that because you were born into it. It's not something that you chose to do. It kind of chose you.
So I'm curious then, like do you not think you would have got to this place without having started at Patagonia?
That's a good question. I don't know.
But now you do it. You wouldn't not ever consider doing it, right?
Correct. And I guess there's another way to look at it, which is I need something to get me out of bed, and just designing glasses and marketing and creating a brand isn't enough.
Right. And that's super interesting, because that was always what I heard from my parents. You know, my mum would always say, I'm not interested in soap. Face cream is just oil and water. Like that's not interesting to me, but it's the activism and the work and the messaging and the communications and the help that I can do from the sales of the product that excites me, that gets me out of bed in the morning. So
let's start at the beginning. Let's start with your mother was a pioneer in all this.
Yes, with the benefit of hindsight, most definitely, especially in social business, being socially and ethically, responsible in business, for sure.
So let's start with, who was your mother?
So my mum started a UK company called The Body Shop that was skin and hair care, naturally based skin and hair care products that just kind of hit a wave in the early 80s and became a whole lot bigger than any of us thought, became an international business. And she became really she was really one of the foremost kind of business women in the UK. Like it seemed like she was kind of more than just her shops. She was a persona that was larger than her stores in a way, which was, I always found interesting, which was, is The Body Shop my mum, or is my mum The Body Shop? Like, which way does that go? So, that, and her way of doing things was to inject as much responsibility, as much environmental responsibility, as much social responsibility, as much product sourcing responsibility. And I think one of the areas she was most proud of is the care and the responsibility for her staff. Like that was very important to her as well. That kind of had a trickle-on effect for a lot of businesses, a lot of people who were kind of growing up in that era. I get to hear and see them now saying, your mum was the reason X, Y, and Z. Your mum was the reason that when I opened my business, I made sure that I was, thinking about it from an environmental best practice or whatever. So yeah, she was quite a thing.
So she was instrumental, I think, in the United States with the Social Venture Network. Was she part of that?
She was part of that. Yes. Yeah. So, yeah. And that was like, I mean, what a crew, right? You know, I got to sit around the dinner table or, you know, bear witnesses to conversations, you know, with all of them, with Ben and Jerry and Patagonia and Burt's Bees, Esprit, like all, you know, it was just so interesting because, you know, obviously they were running and creating and driving these businesses forward. But the conversation was all about how they can do this in a way that is going to, you know, hold their staff, hold the environment, hold the communities that their stores were in a better way. So it was pretty interesting.
We almost take that for granted today, don't we?
I often think about it as how much have we really progressed from that? It's like, you know, that they kind of created this eruption and this kind of sea of change. And I don't know how much it's really moved forward since then. I don't think there's necessarily been a backward slide, but I don't think it's really kind of progressed in the way that I was thinking. I think maybe my mum thought that there might be. Didn't kind of like, certainly didn't move the needle in the big corporations. I think that they were kind of maybe hoping that they would show from their work that you can do business and make money in this way.
Right. I mean, and it's probably some generational cleansing that has to happen.
Right.
I don't know if that's the right term, but, you know, I think our kids, it's almost a requirement that companies have some type of either social or environmental mission because that is so much on their plate at the moment.
Oh my God, I totally. I see, you know, our kids' age and the way they shop and the things that are important to them. They are very, very educated consumers. And, you know, and how they go to battle with companies on TikTok or on social media. It's super interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I remember driving up the coast of California with Yvon Chouinard and he instilling into me how our purchasing decisions are really the last form of voting in this country. And it's really how we should vote.
Yes, totally. So it reminds me of, I think my daughter, she was little, maybe like 4 or 5. And we were here in Santa Barbara with my mum was out to stay and mum had a bee in her bonnet about like Gap at the time.
I just love the fact that you said a bee in a bonnet.
And the idea that my mum would wear a bonnet is just hilarious. And so I think things had come to light about the sweatshop labor. So we were standing outside the Gap and the Gap kids, and my mum looked at my daughter and she said, Maya, go in there and tell them that you don't like that their little clothes are made by children in sweatshops in India or China or wherever. And like, I was like, Mum, like, really? Like, you know, now? And Maya, you know, marched into the shop and I was like behind her and she goes, I really don't like it that you use sweaty children to make your clothes. And I looked at her, I was like, see, like message missed here. Like, but I mean, my point being really that it was always a conversation. There was always an opportunity to create a little disruption, you know, to create a little, to say something or to do something.
That's amazing. What was your background at the company? I want to like kind of fuse the upbringing of your professional career along with it's a family business. I mean, a rather large one, but it's a family business.
Yeah, it was all of the things. I think because I didn't have a vision for where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do. Or actually, that's not true. I kind of did, but it was incongruent with what my parents were doing. Like I would have loved to have been a casting director or, you know, a journalist but for fluff, like nothing deep. And that was very kind of congruent with the messaging about what you do when you're in this family. And so I was kind of like, I didn't really have much of a vision about what to do. And I think my mum was so anxious that I was adrift that I was just put to work. And that started from the stockroom all the way up to, you know, branding, collaborating on product design, visual design, activism, campaigns, all of it. And I think with the benefit of hindsight, that maybe she had a vision for me that would include perhaps stepping in, or for both of us, my sister and I, for stepping in if they still owned the company later on down the line, because the breadth of experience that I got and the training that I got was so wide and so deep in these areas, in all the areas. Like, you know, I feel like I could go into any shop and run that with my eyes closed. now. Like I could go into any marketing department and kind of slip right in, minus the new lingo that they have. So I think it was, I got a very long and wide area and nothing in finance or operations. She knew my limitations, but yeah. So.
That was a big deal for that generation, the succession. And we saw it with Patagonia just this last year. And we witnessed, if you go back, I don't know how many years ago that was probably 10, 12 years ago when Ben & Jerry's had to sell to
Unilever.
Correct. And they tried to do everything that they could to keep the social missions intact through the sale, which is borderline impossible. So, of that generation, so that actually makes a lot of sense that your mother was thinking about, if we sell this thing out, we can't control how we want the social mission to continue.
Yes. Yeah. I remember when they did end up finally selling to L'Oreal and the backlash that they kind of received. We speak just about my mum, but my dad was they were very much a union. He was very much enmeshed in all of it. He ran the company with the same vision and mission and moral, component that she did. But there was a lot of backlash for it. But she was very much like, no, I've done everything that I can do right now. I'm older and I'm tired. And I am going to take all the stuff that I'm so passionate about and I'm so good at, and I'm going to turn my attention there. And so it's that, I often wonder that. I was like, did she want us to take over in some capacity, or did she just want us to be busy and not lazy? And so she kept me particularly busy. I don't honestly know, but
those things are not mutually exclusive.
No, not at all. Oh, yeah.
So when you started working, you must have been early 20s? Or
no, fucking God, no. No. So I mean, working properly was as soon as I left school, but every holiday from 12 onwards, it was a non-negotiable. I mean, even younger, like before the company was even, more than just a handful of shops, it was, pouring patchouli oil into bottles, making sure labels were on, making sure like you counted how many you had and how many bottles of perfume you were getting out of a liter, like. It was all that kind of stuff. So, but no, God, every vacation was a working vacation.
So when were you exposed to the philanthropic side of the business, for a lack of better words?
Always. It was always there. Always. And both my mum and dad were very, very much community activists prior to opening the business. So it seeped in. I honestly don't remember a time when it didn't exist. From the very first shop, I mean, it was refilling the bottles. Mum would always say that the reason that she started the different size of bottles, and the 2 ounce up to the 32 ounce, or whatever it was because she didn't have enough product to fill the store with. But she would ask people to come back in with their empty bottles so she could refill them in there. So there was always something. There was always leaflets, even if it was kind of handwritten leaflets that she was writing out about animal testing. Like it was always there.
It's amazing that you remembered the 2 ounces to 32 ounce.
Oh my God. Honestly, I swear to God, I'll never forget.
It's ingrained in your head.
It's ingrained. I mean, it's so funny. It's things that you'll never forget. Like I can't walk past like a Claire's Accessories or something and seeing kids having their ear pierced. And it reminds me, there was a period of time when the shops were a little slow. I think they only had maybe 2 or 3 at the time. And Mum needed to generate more income. And this was a lesson that I'm so grateful for learning. And she didn't know, I think she was just trying to think what she could possibly add into the offering to bring in some more cash. And so she's like, ear piercing. And so I just remember like me, my dad, my sister, all being sat down. And my mum, you didn't want my mum near any kind of machinery ever. And we're like, oh. But she was like, I've got to practice, so we all got our ears pierced, including my dad, like, so she could practice piercing people's ears to bring in some more money. But what that taught me was that you can pivot, you can switch, you can find things to fill holes whilst you're getting to the next step, literally like holes in ears. But she never went to business school. So I was never around people who had gone to, or she never placed any value really on people who had gone to business school.
That's such an Yvonne thing too.
I wonder
Yeah.
if they were all just sitting around there at SVN going,
Oh yeah, just bitching and moaning about Ivy
totally.
Leagues.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. But yeah, so she would say, I don't want them running my company because they can only think in the way they've been taught. They can't think.
And it's short term. It's quarter to quarter instead of 10 years from now, 20 years from now, or 2 generations from now. So when did you get, like, what was your participation in the philanthropy side of the business? And did you have any input on that? Or did your mom and dad really kind of know? Because it wasn't just one thing.
No, God, no. You know, it's so funny because when I was thinking about this recently, so they had the body shop, obviously, was their, the business, but I kind of almost ran out of fingers trying to remember all the nonprofits and the other kind of subsidiary things that they have started and that still exist today. And so to answer your question, our input in terms of the company's kind of social driven missions, sure, she'd ask, what animals from the endangered species would you like to see in soap? Like, like that kind of thing. But no, nothing from on a bigger scale. But it was always, you're participating like this. We're doing a campaign about blowing the whistle on domestic violence. Like, this is where we're starting. This is the goals. This is where we're getting to. You're going out to meet the people who have personal stories. So in that regard, we were very much involved and engaged. I think really becoming much more hands-on in it was when they started the family foundation, the Roddick Foundation. And that was definitely okay, now all of us have a seat at that table. You're all a director. You take some ownership. And mum and dad decided that they would give my sister and I a significant pot of money at that time in the foundation that we were responsible for allocating. So we found the things that caused us an involuntary pull towards, and we were given free rein to, investigate, to research, to work alongside, and to bring them in these organizations to the table with a view to funding. So that was pretty amazing, actually. And we were young, in kind of early 20s, I would say.
Yeah, that's young.
Yeah. Oh my God, it was such a gift, such a gift. I mean, literally, but for me, you always end up getting more from it than you realize.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean,
and especially in hindsight, right?
Oh my, totally.
Yeah. Do you mind telling my favorite story? because your mother had a plan for the wealth of the body shop.
Yeah.
Yes. And can you tell that? Because that is absolutely one of my favorite stories.
Okay. So to give context, although we're talking about all the philanthropy and all the good, I was a very vacuous, superficial teenager, and just
those are the same thing. Vacuous
and super. I was just making sure that you got it.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it was just so much to my mum's absolute horror. I was out at nightclubs all the time. I didn't know that I didn't know that socialites or things existed, but I think in my own way, I was trying to be part of a scene.
Was this in London?
In London at that time, I think just to punish me a little bit because she was so kind of grossed out by my superficiality. She put me to work in the Heathrow body shop, one of the body shops in Heathrow Airport, which is a special kind of retail hell, let me tell you. And so we'd work there until I'd work there until 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and we'd have to start at 5 in the morning. So I'd have to be up early to get up. It was awful. And so anyway, on a given night, you'd leave the nightclubs in London and you'd leave on Sunday mornings. The Sunday papers in England are really quite a thing, right? Everybody grabs their Sunday papers, and the tabloids, the guys would be selling them outside the tube stations, and they'd always have the headlines on there. And so we're walking out, me and my friend at the time, walking out of the tube station after a very late night. And there was a headline that said, Anita Roddick is leaving nothing to her children. And it was some more succinct than that. And I was like, what? Ha, 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 ha. That's so funny. They got it wrong again. stupid press, whatever, get home, wait till a reasonable hour, like 9 a.m, call my mum. I was like, God, did you see that crap that they've written now? And she's like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, the headline that you're not leaving anything to me and Sam in your will. And she's like, well, what makes you think that's crap? That's true. Like, what in anything I've ever done in my life would make you think that I'm just going to gift you a load of money for not, like, when I get, and it was crushing, Tim. It was like that moment where I was like, this idea that I was going to be a lady who lunched in London, taking, I don't know what I thought.
You're a teenager.
I was a teenager, but it evaporated very quickly.
That is so.
Oh God. And even that, like, even after, my mum passed away, she died a number of years ago. It's still amazing how much press that got, because she legit did. She left her share of money, whatever, it put it into our family foundation. And it was like, I kind of felt like that re-trauma happening again. It's like, why do you have to keep talking about this?
Your mom sounded awesome.
She was hilarious. God.
What a way to find out.
I know. I know. But it was,
probably hungover?
Well, I didn't have a lot of money. Working at the Heathrow Body Shop. So I'd usually be able to buy like one vodka and orange a night, but just sip it through a straw to make it last longer. So, oh God. So probably not drunk, but definitely tired.
So having that experience, now you have kids of your own.
Oh.
So and having this DNA of philanthropic work, social mission, environmental mission driven life. What are you doing or are you? I shouldn't assume that. How do you tiptoe around that, or do you not tiptoe, and do you kind of carry a heavy fist around that? The subject of giving.
It's complicated. I guess out of all of those options, it's probably more tiptoeing than anything else, if I'm being very honest. It's not a subject that our family in general is comfortable with. And then, I think it's kind of generational discomfort around money and the idea of it. So I think I've been very remiss about the conversations about it. And I think I probably caused my kids anxiety in a way about not being open and having these conversations about it, because I always joke with them. I'm like, yeah, you guys, better make sure that, that you guys have got yourself sorted out, because I'm planning on spending it all. So there might not be lot, left for you. But obviously that's not completely true. But I'm so anxious that in some way being comfortable because I was always, like, later on in life, once I had kids, I was definitely given things that made my life comfortable. I'm very anxious to not make them too comfortable. And in the process, because I don't want to dampen down what they're capable of. Like, I often think, like, could I have done more? Who would I be and what would I be doing if I hadn't been in this slipstream? Right. And not to say that I can't still, or I couldn't have done it either way. It's just how it's happened, how I've ended up. And so I'm so anxious that they won't realize their full potential and realize that they could do it on their own, because I still am not sure what I'm capable of doing on my own, because it was always kind of engineered a bit for me.
Just to backfill that a bit, I think we're all incapable of knowing to this day, at our age, that we still don't know what we're capable of.
Do you feel that way?
Yes.
In all areas?
Yes.
Really interesting.
Why?
I don't know, because I think it's, I don't know, that kind
Why
of
are you surprised about that?
I think it's because I have an assumption that when you have achieved something on your own merit, that you have that sense of kind of satisfaction and that understanding of what you're capable of. And obviously that doesn't mean to say that you're not capable of more, but you do have a general, I don't know, I just assumed that you would have a general sense or comfort level with it, maybe.
Yeah, I would say no.
Oh, well, great. I'm feeling so much better. Yeah.
Yeah, part of it, I think all entrepreneurs are constantly, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but I think you stay always kind of hungry, and paranoid's a bad word. I hate that word, but I don't know what other word to use.
Like seeking, searching.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, so you went off and started a business also.
Yes and no. So my sister started it in the UK.
Correct.
So it was a very high-end luxury sex erotica business. My sister's like, the way she thinks is a lot like my mother. Like she's brilliant. And Sam is very, like, she's definitely like a born activist. But also because of the way that we were brought up, she created this business started this business that was trying to put basically ethics, pleasure, beauty, morality into the sex arena, and asked me if I would start and create the business in the USA, which initially I was unsure about because the climate is funny. Even though the Brits are kind of repressed, they're not repressed sexually. Whereas in America, their comfort level in England about like sex and bodies and all the rest is really kind of quite unusually not what you would expect. Mm-hmm. You know, our main tabloid, you know, when I was growing up on page 3, it was the page 3 girl with the boobs out. So, you know, men would just be having their cup of tea, looking at a pair of boobs, also reading the morning paper. But here there's a lot of discomfort. I think less so now, but when we started the company here, it wasn't. But you've got the best sexual educators, like the best minds around it. So I was like, God, I don't know if it's ready for it here yet. So I think this was 2003, 4-ish. I said, let me start the online business. Like I'll start the website here and then we can take it from there. And then within a year or so, we're like, okay, we got to, you know, shit or get off the pot. Let's give it a go. I think around that time, an episode of Sex and the City had happened, and there'd been an episode with a vibrator. One of the women had used a vibrator, and there was all of a sudden it felt like things are changing a little bit. So I then opened stores here, and we had stores in New York and LA.
What was the name of it?
Coco De Mer.
Uh-huh.
And that Coco De Mer is a seed, Mother Nature's naughty gift to the world. And it's a massive seed, I've got one somewhere, that looks like the front pelvis region of a woman, even with like pubic hair, like husky coconut hair, where the pubes would be. It's beautiful and it's very naughty. And so it was, yeah, so that was the reason.
It's so much better when you say that with a British accent.
Is it? Let's test, you say it.
Naughty. Okay.
You're right.
Okay, now you.
Naughty.
See? See? So
That's
much
true.
better.
That's why I live here. I can say naughty.
But to your point, it was before its time.
So before its time. I mean, it was definitely ahead of its time, but amazing because it was, you know, it broke into areas of fashion. Like we had Vogue and Harper's and, you know, like all using our like products that we were selling, our leather gear in their fashion shoots and the lingerie. And, you know, there was so much beauty in the store that you would walk in and not know what you were walking into. You'd think it was like a houseware shop or a home shop. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, that's not a small vessel for salt. It's like, what is this thing?
So how did you instill your parents' values into that?
That was easy. That was, you know, it was, okay, right, we're going to do wood products, spanking paddles, rulers. I have one here, it's just a ruler, but it says, teach me a lesson on it. Like, you know, all those kind of cheeky little things. Silk blindfolds, all these kind of products that we were sourcing and creating ourselves. They were sustainable wood. Cue your joke. You know, they were made in fair trade projects in India that we were familiar with, so we knew their background. Like, you know, so we were working with kind of artisans, so we could really kind of understand how they were making their glass blowing, like where it was coming from. So all that kind of thing was very much instrumental from our parents. Education was a huge aspect of it. I think, you know, my mum and dad always had a big educational component to their business, whether it was leaflets or whether it was campaigns or window displays or whatever. So we had a big educational component too of, you know, classes and salons and history of sex and, you know, how it ended up where it is kind of today. So that was very much and component, and activism. That was my sister in London. I couldn't do it in LA, but Sam organized a big naked war protest all through Covent Garden with all these women with all this kind of war protests written all over them with gas masks on to protest the war that was happening. And so it was just there,
Right. It's just how you did it.
Just how you do it.
Does Sam have kids?
She has one.
Yeah. So it's just going to be interesting to see if the legacy from your parents gets passed through to them in some capacity, or if it's just going to be how that generation also just behaves.
Is going to be super interesting. And it's a question that I wrestle with a lot, which is how much am I measuring them and their value, not their value, but how much measurement am I attaching to whether or not they do this kind of stuff or not? Like, I'll give you a good example. So my daughter, she just passed the bar and is getting these job offers to become a lawyer at law firms. And we were chatting about it, and she was weighing up the different offers. And one of the law firms does a lot of work with prisoners, people, incarcerated people and mental health patients who are just not getting looked after in the system. And I could feel myself getting super kind of like excited by this, and I had to like numb it down a bit and realize that, oh shit, I am attaching some kind of expectation or value or hope onto the line of work that she is choosing. And I don't want to put that pressure on her. I want it to be a suggestion and a hope that it's organically going to come, but I don't want her to think I'm disappointed if she doesn't. But I had to acknowledge that I felt something in there when she was saying, it's a weird,
which isn't so terrible. I mean, you're imparting wisdom on the next generation.
Definitely. And I do think it's like, for right or wrong, my mum would always say, you being of service, or one being of service and working on behalf of others is the rent that you pay for not having to pay rent. And I was like, yeah, it's a solid point. That's legit. They have heard that from us a lot. So.
Well, good. I just did a quick Google search and on like who actually gives in the United States from a demographic perspective. And it's not too surprising. The baby boomers give the most just as in a overall dollar volume.
Are we baby boomers? I always get this confused.
No, you are a Gen Xer.
Gen Xer, okay.
Yeah. So the boomers is a massive group. I forget the exact size, but it doesn't matter. Let's just call them very big. And Gen X is a much smaller group of us. So they give more just overall. And Gen X actually gives the most per capita. Even though there's less people giving, we're giving the most dollars per person.
Which is kind of heartening to hear, because if the boomers, they're the olders, right? The hey
Correct.
Boomers.
Yeah.
Right. So if they're in their departure lounge and they're kind of heading out of here, we're at least filling that gap by the amount that we're giving.
Per person. That's right.
Right. So which leads us to wonder what's happening
behind us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So your parents were boomers, same as mine.
Right.
So we're X and your kids are the millennial.
Right.
Which I do have faith in. So
yes. We have to.
Yeah. From where we sit today.
Yeah.
Let's hope they can do better.
Yeah. And they seem to be very, I don't know, they seem to be very clear about what's important and what isn't. And it doesn't necessarily always align with what we believe to be what was important isn't, but it is there. They do have it. And, I am very heartened by their, and just looking fingers, toes, all of it crossed, by their commitment to the environment and the planet and the bigger picture. Like,
yep.
They do seem to have a bigger picture. I don't think my generation, I didn't grow up in the States, so it's hard to go. Certainly not in the UK. We did not have a bigger picture vision at all.
I can say the same. I did grow up in the States and about the same age as you. And I would say that we did not have a bigger picture, unless you consider MTV to be a bigger picture. Does that count?
I mean, 100%. Especially if you were asking a superficial 17-year-old in London at the time. It definitely did.
Okay, before we go, can you just show us your fingernail?
Oh,
Nails.
I was unclear as to which color I wanted, so I was like, I'll just do that one. And it's been great in the road rage moments I've had lately. So
Awesome.
oh,
Justine, thank you. That was super enlightening. Always great talking to you. And I love your perspective on all this stuff.
oh, thank you, Tim. As we would say in England, always a pleasure and never a chore.
That sounds so proper.
It does, doesn't it? It was wonderful. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat with you like this.